Well, noswaith dda pawb. Good evening, everybody. We're coming towards the end now of our virtual conference over the last few days of Plaid Cymru, and I'm really pleased that I'm joined by Charlotte Church, no less, for tonight's conversation online, and we're really looking forward to all of your questions. But Charlotte, croeso.
Thank you very much. How's it going?
Good, fantastic. How's we've got to ask this, haven't we? How's lockdown and everything been for you in Dean, I suppose?
It's been sort of okay. I had a baby, so I've
congratulations, Frida.
Frida, so I've got a little baby.
Named after Frida Kahlo, or what's
Frida? And she's Frida Simone.
Right. Wow. Right. Okay.
So
a lot of cultural.
So two serious revolutionary women. And yes, so I was pregnant throughout all of lockdown. And to be honest, it seemed quite poignant that the whole world seemed to be in this pregnant pause. And so was I. I was gestating and waiting. And so it sort of felt like, and also it meant that I didn't have any FOMO because everybody wasn't going off and doing fabulous things and festivals, and so my FOMO levels were under control. So yeah, we were very fortunate to have quite a mellow lockdown.
Yeah, I mean, I've had a similar experience with Ela. It was two now, and because there's been like a sort of leveling down with everyone else's social life has turned into the kind of what I got used to the last couple of years. So there is that. And
yeah,
but and I've got to see a lot more of him myself, of course. So that's been a kind of a silver lining from a difficult time,
Yeah, funny, wasn't it? I think at the start there was. I don't know, people just started really reaching out for connection and connecting with old friends and Zooming with people like we'd never done that before. Those options were always there for us. But yeah, I think that towards the end then it got a bit more psychologically difficult. So going into these further restrictions now, it feels different. It feels a little heavier. Maybe that's because of the time of year. And also because it's not novel anymore. The first time it happened, it was sort of novel and odd and different. And so we'll see how it goes and hopefully stick together.
On looking forward to the future and on a positive note, I mean, we're both parents of young children who are going to grow up, hopefully, and become citizens of an independent Wales.
Absolutely. I am hopefully going to spend a good deal of time working towards that, as I know, you guys are. But I think that this modern world is pretty complex, isn't it? And I think an independent Wales, to me, seems to be a very practical solution, really, to being able to have a say. I think that the UK's democracy doesn't really extend to us, and although we're devolved and such, it's not quite enough. It doesn't cut the mustard. So how that might look,
and a lot of people have been. I think in this time of COVID, there's been a lot of deep reflection going on. Some people have said. This is not the time to talk about independence, but actually what I found is people are more engaged with these sort of deep questions about the future of Wales, the future of the planet, a different economic model than at any time that I can remember.
Yeah, I think that what COVID-19 has done is, and even, this harsh mistrust is not finished with us and the lessons that it's got to teach us. But essentially, I think that it will force us over the next year, two, who knows how long this is going to go on, to reevaluate everything, really. Obviously, now, when furloughing ends, if things like universal basic income don't come into play, then we're looking at a really, unprecedented situation. Like, how are people going to support themselves and their families and do the simplest things? And so I think it affords, if we are looking for silver linings, which of course we always should be, with great upheaval and great change, there are definitely opportunities. Of course, there'll be hardships. Of course, we'll have to be resilient and try and be as creative and kind as we possibly can. But absolutely, I believe that this is definitely the time to start pushing forth ideas of how on earth, of how we want to create the future, because let's not get it twisted. That is what is possible for all of us, whether it be on an individual level or on a nationwide level. We are creating our own reality and our own future, and so let's make it something that looks better than it does now.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think one of the things that you see most often when discussing independence at the moment is people telling their independence story, and it often starts with, I never thought I would say this, but almost like it's coming out for independence. Like, but I'm all in favor of coming out, as you know. But tell me about your independence journey, and take us right back, Charlotte, to growing up and childhood, etc., and then take us on the arc, if you like, which has led us to your strong support for an independent and a very radically different Wales that you just were referring to.
I think that I grew up in Cardiff, and I didn't know any Welsh speakers. The Welsh language wasn't around at all, and so the culture that I was brought up in was very. It wasn't English, of course. We still had our Welsh identity, but it was more sort of shallow, a bit more of a shallow Welsh identity in terms of just singing and rugby, and after. Growing up and in my adulthood, having a lot of friends who are Welsh language speakers who have grown up in West Wales and North Wales and really have a good grasp on the deep historical culture and history of Wales. I understand a lot more about, the Welsh nation, and the history of Wales, but it doesn't resonate with me on an emotional level because it wasn't what I was brought up in, and so that's interesting. So I think what that's left me with is that I don't have a sort of deep patriotism at all, where but I don't have the emotional roots in it that a lot of other Welsh people do. And in part, I'm a bit gutted about that. But your life is your life, and I was there was other things that I had because I grew up in Cardiff, in our capital city, and so the idea of an independent Wales for me isn't something born out of patriotism or an idea of preservation, but for me, it's about progress and pushing forward, but also to start including everybody in Wales in what this culture is, forging forward with, but of course, taking from the past everything that is and educating everybody, because there's so much depth and richness to the culture of Wales, which so much of us, particularly lots of us who don't speak the language, just don't have access to. And so I think I heard it described once beautifully by an English speaker, an English person who had come to live in Wales, who learned the language and said that learning the language for him was like going from seeing in black and white to seeing in colour. And that made me go, oh gosh, I wish I knew the language. I wish I was brought up in it. Yeah, so my want for independence is mostly from a political perspective. Yeah, so that's sort of my independence story. I'm not changed.
I think that a lot of that will resonate for a lot of people who've gone on this journey, you know, in recently, and in a sense, my own my own journey wasn't that dissimilar, you know. So I was from a Labour family. I don't know who writes your Wikipedia page, but I think somebody's put on a quote there. You know, I don't know how they decide what's relevant. I've said sometime I was a socialist before I was a nationalist.
Yeah.
I was precocious, right? So I was a socialist at 8.
Yeah.
I joined Plaid Cymru when I was 14. But in the middle of the miners' strike. But for me as well, independence is the vehicle for creating the society, you know, a fairer society, based on social and economic justice, rather than being an end in itself. So, you know, I wasn't a kind of a Welsh nationalist in some kind of abstract sense, if that makes sense.
Yes.
I saw independence as a political project, which was about changing society.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people, you know, I don't think the 50% of Labour voters that have now supporting independence, I don't think that they become Welsh nationalists overnight in the traditional sense, if you know what I mean. I think that they see that actually independence is the only way that we can say ta-ta to Westminster and so the right-wing agenda and create something better.
Yeah, absolutely. And how did it start for you? Like, if you go back to your childhood, how did you become so motivated to want to change things? Even, you know, obviously, like you just said.
Yeah, I mean, I think you know, we many of us have a like they call it sometimes the crucible moment, you know, which is, you know, what made you an activist or what drew you into progressive politics, etc. And for me, it was the strike. So it's the kind of like thing that I return to in my mind to anchor myself. And for me, it was particularly a whole community coming together, faced with, you know, the enormous power of the state, basically, you know, and you know, but a sense of the community coming together, not for their own individual self-interest. You know, they weren't fighting to save their own jobs. They were trying to fight to save the jobs of the next generation, and, you know, and the community as a whole. And you know, that sticks with me. That incredible, you know, seeing working class people sacrifice so much for an ideal.
Yeah.
You know, it's even though it's sort of it brings out a lot of emotion in me, and that to me is my sense of Wales. You know, that sort of deep sense of community. We are a community of communities, aren't we?
Yeah.
And that's my, you know, that's my kind of version of so what it is to be Welsh is this deep sense of solidarity, you know. And
so what do you think, how do you think that, because obviously in order to attain an independent Wales, then, you know, you will really have to speak to lots of different types of communities now, because Wales is pretty multicultural. And obviously you've got, Plaid has got their safe places where they're sort of always going to get a lot of votes, who have been on the Plaid journey for a while. How are you intending to sort of get those other community of communities to see what Plaid are trying to do?
Yeah, no, I mean, that is the number one task, really, is how we create out of this wonderful, this diverse mosaic of a nation, which is fantastic, right? How do we create a sense of unity in that diversity? And it's always been a bit of a struggle for us in Wales, isn't it? Actually, because we have been played off a little bit. You know, divide and conquer, divide and rule has been a bit of a tactic, isn't it? So, you know, Welsh speaker versus non-Welsh speaker, the north versus the south, rural versus industrial and urban, etc. So that's what we've got to create a national movement, and it has to speak with all of those voices. And I think that's what's really exciting about the independence movement in the last few years, is it is so diverse. It is cacophonous, in its diversity, which is fantastic, because we need people that are from all of those communities, territorial and other communities as well. People of color, the LGBT community. We need that rainbow flag, to be painted in all those colors. And then Plaid, I think, because obviously our role as a political party is to win elections and form a government. We need to be talking about things that resonate to people in their daily lives. So rather than talking about, again, sort of abstract ideas or things that are divorced from people's, reality, we've got to actually talk about things that matter to them now. So, the last few days, talking about solving the housing crisis, universal free childcare, getting carers paid at a minimum of £10 an hour. Those are the things which actually give. They express the reality of the Wales that we're trying to create, and then people will make the connection. Oh, right, I see. That is the journey that we're going to go on, and that's why I, joined the movement all those years ago. It wasn't because of an abstract sense of Wales that we're trying to create. It was about, it was grounded in the very real situation that we were in back then. And I think it's important to have some fun while we're doing it as well. While we're changing Wales and changing the world, it's very, very important that we create positive energy and we're optimistic, So I think that's such an important message, that we say to people, look, there's no problem in Wales that we can't solve. Most of the problems are there. They're man and woman made, though it's mostly men in a patriarchal society. But that means that we can actually then devise and design an entirely different way of doing that. And that's a very, very liberating message for people, I think.
And how, I've set up a free to attend democratic school. So I'm really interested in the idea of human rights and children's rights. So, but also in participatory democracy, in ideas like participatory budgeting, and co-creation of all things, really, because I think that the way in which you do make things fun, you do make them vital, you do make sure people have an emotional connection with it, is to involve them, is to give them some actual power. So how structurally, if we were to have an independent Wales, or even for the whole movement, really, even for working towards that, how will you go about structurally putting things in place which really empower people in this sort of participatory democracy?
Yeah, no, I think that's really essential, and I think we've got to get better at it. I mean, I think there were some legitimate criticisms, I think, about the Independence Commission's report. I think the content of the report was really comprehensive, and I think has made a major contribution. But I think we can get better at process, and I think that process is a really important part of politics, and it influences the content and the outcome. Yeah. So we need as a movement to be constantly thinking about how we design the way that we have the conversation, because that is part of, creating a successful movement. So I think that part of their suggestion actually takes us in that direction. So the next stage has got to be creating a consensus in Wales amongst all these communities in favour of independence. And we've got to do that in a sort of bottom-up participatory manner. So citizens' assemblies, plural, in different contexts, absolutely essential. But I think as well, in the way, when we form a government next year, Charlotte, I think the way that we design and deliver our public services, we've got to use this kind of approach. So there's things like human-centered design, which is basically, it's a very fundamental idea. It says, look, why do we talk to the people that use the service in redesigning it? Because actually they're experts. it's a different kind of expertise, and you've got to blend it with some technical expertise. But they know more than anyone, what works and what doesn't and why. So we should be using that. And there's some good work actually with the co-production network in Wales. Done some really excellent work in the health service and things like if you're suffering from a chronic disease, you live with that disease all of the time. So actually, you have incredible knowledge, and building networks then of people that have that are living with certain conditions, and then bringing them into the health service. So almost you get a people's powered health service, if you like, because they have incredible insight about how to manage conditions, live with a condition, etc. So that's we've got to unleash the power of that sort of people knowledge.
And I think also it's, as you said, it's about trying to make it fun, because what modern politics has to contend with is endless entertainment, and not just entertainment, but I believe that the majority of people are addicted to their smartphones, their devices, and so you're looking at everything has been made into this attention economy, and so how on earth do you get people to do things which in their minds they think are traditionally boring, like politics, for the vast majority of people who don't see it as a blood sport, which is not me, are sort of like, oh, politics, boring. I want nothing to do with it. It's got nothing to do with me. I mean, I didn't vote till I was in my late 20s, was the first time I voted, because I didn't think that politics had anything to do with me. I was like, oh, politics, oh God, that's boring, and I don't understand it, and it's got nothing to do with me, And so I think that firstly, you have to go to such a level to get for people to even and how much it affects every area of their life, and then make it really fun. And I think that's through like participatory democracy, but also I do think that we have to be thinking about entertainment a bit here. One idea I had was to, and this is when I sort of supported Labour, but was to take around a party bus, like an open top party bus that travels the length and breadth of Wales. It educates, it goes into communities, and a lot of hard up communities. You have researchers go there beforehand just to see who in the community is the most vocal, are the leaders, who are the talented people, the artists, if there's spoken word poets or rappers or dancers or whoever, and you put on a little show in that place. But you also educate people about politics. And for me, it wasn't necessarily about one party or another. It was just to go, it was just to try and empower people, really, just to make them understand that their voice was important, and that they could change their state. Because I think, people have so purposefully been disenfranchised. That whole rhetoric of what's the point of voting? Everything's so corrupt. This whole system, is just, top-down disempowerment.
Yeah, no, I totally agree, and I think that we as a political party can do stuff to, to make our campaigning methods and the way we communicate more interesting. I think that sometimes means taking risks as well, to being a bit unconventional, and sometimes it's not going to work. So I think our party political broadcast last night was there was definitely a Marmite factor. Some people really, really loved it, and some people really hated it. And I think that's okay, because you've got to try different things. I think I was acting as myself, which is actually a very difficult thing to do. But when you're trying to do something different, right? And I think that's really, really important. But you're right. The role of popular culture is so central to people's lives. We've got to use that kind of space and that format which people understand as a route in to talking about politics. And and it's interesting. Green Man, you've got there, haven't you? Politics and music and culture really intermingle and sort of, cross-pollinate each other. And we've got to sort of think about how we can do that more broadly, you know.
But I think in general, in places like festivals, you're speaking to the already engaged, you know. So I think that, you know, how you make politics. Did for a while was have or at least the idea was go around pubs. This can't really happen in COVID times, but go around lots of different pubs all over Wales and have pub politics. The idea was to make debate popular again, but in, you know, amongst people, that it didn't just have to be on telly amongst politicians, amongst experts, that actually just this idea of debate down the pub, and maybe just a bit more structured than a rant, you know, the people drunkenly ranting in pubs. But, you know, I think things like that on a community level, which are organized, you know, and it has to be quite small, doesn't it? You have to have lots of little small factors and communities that make up this bigger whole.
Yeah, I mean, I remember when growing up, I was fascinated because there's a pub in Artmanford called the Pick and Shovel, which is like, that's the everyone calls it the Pick. It's the working men's social club, but it had a blue room where you could only talk politics. So it was founded by it was founded by volunteers who went to the Spanish Civil War, Communist Party ILP members. And you could only talk politics in that room, you know. And that rule still existed in the 1980s. And there was a painted bust of Lenin in one corner and Kennedy in the other. And they both had rouge on their cheeks. You know, it was
amazing.
I know. But yeah, I think a modern version of like a sort of radical debating society in pubs. And Charlotte, the indie party bus has got to happen.
Yeah,
we've got to make this happen post-COVID. No?
Absolutely, indie party bus. But the thing is that it would all be street parties.
Yeah.
So I mean, I suppose there's still the rule of 30 outside.
Another reason.
What do you think the role of, because most political movements have had a huge creative aspect to them. And had the artists of the time and of the day be really present. So how do you see, you know, creativity and creatives playing a role?
Yeah, well, I think that, you know, it's, you know, I think we can take a leaf out of some of the work that was done in Scotland in the run up to the independence referendum, wasn't it? Because that was such a vibrant campaign. And you know, creatives had such a fantastic role in that sort of vibrancy, and I think, you know, we can you know, look to with the way that we organize, maybe people that have. I mean, I get lots of people, sort of photographers, filmmakers, saying, "Look, I want to do something about independence, etc." And we get so many offers at the moment, which is fantastic, which shows that people are really engaged. But maybe we need to kind of create a bit of structure around that, Charlotte, so that we can create a platform. I mean, you were involved with Yes is More, and you know, that was a fantastic. You could have filled that concert room, filled the tram shed 10 times over. I think, you know,
it was pretty great.
When we can, Millennium Stadium, here we come. You know? Absolutely,
totally. Yeah, I think that art and culture has to play a central role. There's a couple of questions that I wanted to ask you, because there are some things which I don't understand about how an independent Wales could work, but also what I don't understand about the way in which.
Can I just 1 second, Charlotte? I'm gonna we have a slight interruption here, which you'll be familiar with, so I'll.
You've got a
yeah. Parenting duties. I'll be back in 2 seconds. That was completely unscripted as well. Look.
Oh, go on.
2 seconds. There we are.
No worries.
Just to show I'm doing my bit for the environment, we'll put that there. Well, yeah.
Oh, gorgeous.
2 seconds.
No worries. For all you watching at home, maybe I'll take you on a little tour of here's some of my marvelous plant work. My house is mostly jungle. I have a great deal of houseplants. There you are.
I'm back. There we are. Yes, I think. I think your plants are looking better than mine, Charlotte. But there we are. You know. I'm trying. Yes. Anyway, we were. Where were we?
Sorry, I was talking about. There are some things that I don't understand. Primarily with the economy of Wales, like what are we producing? What I don't really understand the economy of Wales as it stands now, but also how it could look in the future. I mean, I know that's probably very difficult to predict right now, not only because of what independence, how that would change and be different, but also COVID, which changes everything. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think people often focus on the negatives when we talk about the Welsh economy, and obviously, I mean, I think it is true that we're underperforming relative to our potential. But the good news is that means that we've got a lot of latent potential, which can be realized. So that's the way to look at it. I mean, I think that the world is changing around us. So I think we've had a difficult time the last however many decades, because we were heavily in coal and steel. We were very much concentrated in a few sort of narrow sectors, and we didn't have that sort of diversified economic base. Then we sort of emphasized inward investment, bringing in foreign-owned manufacturing companies, and that sort of helped a little bit. But terrible news about Ford closing, and it's been a real blow to that community. But that didn't provide us with a sustainable answer, and it's not going to be the basis for the future. So, what have we got? Well, we've got fantastic natural resources in terms of renewable energy. Wales is windy, and it's kind of surrounded on three sides by sea. So the good news is that means we're in a very good position for things like marine energy, renewable energy in general, and that's going to be a massive force in the future. And I think the broader point is this: when you actually look at the Welsh economy, and you look at some of the success stories, you realize that there's a kind of a entrepreneurial ecosystem, that actually you don't sort of read about or see directly, but there are companies producing in a whole range of sectors, and I think that actually the moment that we're moving to is an incredibly fruitful one. We retained an ability to make things, when manufacturing became sort of unfashionable, etc. We've actually retained many of those skills in Wales. We're actually very good at exporting. We're more successful as a proportion of our economy at exporting than other parts of the UK in terms of manufactured goods. So where the economy is moving, I think we're in a pretty good spot, because a lot of those jobs that were exported out of Wales, a lot of them are coming back. PPE this year, we learned that, didn't we? The days of outsourcing jobs to other parts of the world is coming to a close. We're going through a phase of deglobalization and relocalization. So there's massive opportunities there, and people are wanting to buy local, like never before. There's a massive movement out there. So I think the world that we're moving to, Charlotte, is a much more, is much more fertile ground for us if we grasp that opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, there was a paper I read recently called Deep Adaptation by a guy called Jem Bendell, which is a very, very pessimistic look at what might happen in the future climate-wise. But it's led to this idea of the 4 R's, they call it, about the lens that they're looking it through is pretty much complete civilization collapse. But you can take it through another lens as well. But the first one is resilience. What is it that we most value, and how do we fight to keep it? The second one is relinquishment. What are we ready to let go of for the benefit of all people and the planet? The third one is restoration. What can we bring back that has been lost? And the fourth one is reconciliation stroke reconnection. How can we live in balance with nature and each other? And I really love that as, that's how we've been in part building the school project that I said. I've set up a charity called the Owen Project, where the children sort of co-create in a democratic, they've formed their own democratic little society, and they co-create what happens in their school. And a lot of our planning and a lot of the way in which we've structured our thinking around that has been around those 4 R's. And so I know that this is, there's a long way to go before this point, but for me the idea of creating a Welsh constitution is just such an exciting creative endeavor. So I was just wondering how you thought about that. I suppose that might be wildest dreams stuff, is it?
No, yeah, I think it has to be co-produced, isn't it, again? So, I mean, I think there's a massive opportunity for us. As we're having this conversation about independence, I think thinking about and giving shape, in our imagination to the kind of country we want to be is really essential. So I think crowdsourcing the constitution. I mean, Iceland had a go at this recently, didn't they, after the financial crisis, when they wanted to change, their politics essentially. So why don't we, put that as a part of this this next phase of building a consensus? So get people involved throughout Wales, have those debates in the pub. Yeah. That's very Welsh, writing a constitution in a pub, but get everyone involved, and there'll be obviously a range of views about all the different elements, but that'll be a real opportunity for us. And obviously then eventually when we get to independence, we'll have to have a referendum on the final finished work of the constitution. But it's the most collective creative act possible to write your own constitution and therefore write your own future. Absolutely.
I do think there's part of me that, a lot of where I've come from, and in Cardiff growing up, there was a lot of anti-Welsh language rhetoric. I still feel like there's a great deal of healing to do. And I'm not quite sure why there are so many scars there, but I think that there's a lot of, as you said, there's been a lot of divide and conquer. So whether that's been between, the West and the North, or, who has the best Welsh, or, the Welsh speakers, the non-Welsh speakers, the rural, the urban. But I think a lot of the damage has been done in terms of our self-image and how we see ourselves. I think that, we are a bit like England's poor cousin, just, head to toe in hand-me-downs, feeling a bit shitty about ourselves, to be honest. And so I wonder, I do feel like there is a process of healing. That sounds, a bit esoteric and spiritual, but I think that these are the times in which to talk in these ways. So how do you think that Plaid might be a part of some sort of, national healing process that has to happen even before we can form these community of communities?
Yeah, no, that's a really great question, and I think that in a sense, the idea of the citizens' assemblies and creating a national commission, which would then lead this national conversation, I think is part of that. And if those divides that are there, can be healed, and we can create this people use the term common sense, but quite broadly. But really creating a common sense with capital letters of where we're heading and who we can be as a nation. And I think it's important to emphasize, going back to the economic stuff, some of the real positives here, because I think that, the economy of the say the last 30, 40 years has been built around stuff. How can I get it? I want more than you. I've got more than you, therefore I'm better than you. Our culture and our economy has all been geared around that. And I think the economy of the future is going to be based around security and sense of actually having the essentials of life, being safe, healthy, happy. I think we've learned, that's one of the things we learned in the last year. And, less about, tapping away on Amazon and you're getting, something from the other side of the world in 24 hours. I think that we've learned that's not really what leads to well-being. And actually, if you think of the stuff that's important, the essentials of life, the natural environment, community, connection, Wales actually, is a world beater potentially in those things. We've got great community, social fabric. We've got great social connection. We value these things. We're good at looking after each other. We're just stuck at the moment within a political system that the UK is, which is based on that old type of economic thinking.
Yeah, I think.
Yeah.
I think that, as you say, sort of rampant consumerist capitalism has had its day, and also not just has had its day. I think we clearly know that it's not making people happy. It's not fulfilling. We've got a mental health epidemic, and not only is it bad for people, but it is also incredibly bad for the planet and ecosystems. Just to be ravaging the natural earth and exploiting all of our resources. I would like to. I wonder what you think, instead of having the idea of security, it being more about sufficiency.
Yeah.
I think that's certainly, again, to talk about the school, the Owen project. That is what we're really focused on. It's about making people feel capable, making young people feel capable, giving them real skills which will enable them to be sufficient. So actually, as you said, going back to real basics, because we don't know what this world's going to be, whether it's post-COVID, whether it's post-Brexit, whether it's post, with climate change and all of the challenges they're going to face and displaced people. And, everything is so uncertain. We have to be so adaptable in this moment, so light on our feet. But I think the core skills as a nation that we could really use would be the ancient ones, the ones that, our Celtic ancestors, were, marvelous at. So it is about things like how's the soil in Wales? What's our regenerative energy gain going to look like? So can you talk a little bit to me about sustainability and your thoughts about sustainability and us being able to be sufficient right from the get-go, even from the basic skills?
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I mean, sufficiency is a great way of crystallizing it, and there's some really good work done recently about the economics of arrival. So this idea that we've arrived at, in terms of our physical goods, that we've arrived at a certain level of economic development, and rather than this constant aim to have more and more GDP in the sort of conventional sense, and that's so basing your society and an economy then about these essentials of life and how we can provide for them, and and in a sense it kind of links to the Constitution as well, isn't it? Because we could write into the Constitution things like a right to housing, things like even a universal basic income, social, economic, and environmental rights could be written in there. I think Wales certainly has great potential, but we're going to have to change our systems. So you think about agriculture. We've got an agricultural system which has been, focused very much on increasingly forcing farmers down a sort of mass, almost industrial agriculture, farms having to get bigger and bigger, producing one product, and therefore increasingly being at the vulnerable to a small set of, supermarkets, etc. And, moving towards regenerative agriculture, then you want to move towards a system where we're producing a far broader range of crops, of agricultural products in the way that we were doing maybe 100 years ago. Wales was producing soft fruit, in the same way the Scottish still, the Scottish have a massive industry around it. Gwynfor Evans was a market gardener, a predecessor of mine. So we need to be diversifying our agricultural base, much as we need to be diversifying our economy. But one of the reasons that we need to do that is we need to be looking after the soil. You're absolutely right, Charlotte. The soil of Wales and the soil of the world is in crisis because of this industrial kind of agriculture. Unfortunately, there's been, central and for many, many decades. And that's one of the things that we need to change. I think we've got some questions maybe that we'll possibly move on to. I just wanted to, before I go into questions that we've received, just talk about Wales in the world. I mean, as somebody that met 2 popes and a president, have I got that right? Or was it 2 presidents and a pope? Hey, who's counting? I mean, by the time you were 13, there we are.
Yeah, I mean,
I want to know now. Which was it?
It was 2 presidents and 1 pope: John Paul II, Bill Clinton, and George Bush, who asked me what state Wales was in.
Right, that's what I was going. Yeah, what about the view of Wales in the world and how that how that can change? And
yeah, I think nobody ever knew where Wales was. Wherever I travelled in the world, everyone was like, "Oh," I'm doing an American accent. "Oh, Wales. Oh, is that Ireland?" No, it's not Ireland. It's it's this. And I had to tell George Bush, who thought Wales was in America, which was pretty spectacular. But no, nobody ever knew Wales. They might have some sort of recollection if I mentioned Tom Jones and Shirley Bassey, but I think other nations have done very well. Other small nations have done very well in weaving their narrative, haven't they? Whether it's Iceland and them being so kooky and amazing musicians, incredible natural world. And I think that we can absolutely we've got so much sort of magic in the culture and in the natural world. It's so beautiful. Wales is amazing. That we just haven't been great at telling our story, have we? And I think mainly it's because everybody else had the bloody speakerphone. Obviously England had the biggest megaphone to the rest of the world, and a lot of that was about money and putting dirty money through the city of London. But Ireland absolutely smashed their narrative of who they were, and obviously the fact that there's so many Irish people worldwide talking about Ireland, that also helps. So maybe we need to get Welsh people all over the world.
Yeah, I mean, because I lived in Boston for a while, and yeah, the Irish, the Irish connection with Boston is massive, isn't it? But I'm kind of thinking, well, and the Irish pub is ubiquitous. Well, I'm thinking, like, we're good at pubs, and there are Welsh people everywhere. Why haven't we organised, in the same way? So I think we've got to tap into that diaspora, because you do bump into Welsh people everywhere.
Oh, absolutely. But I also think more things like I was involved in the Wales Millennium Centre's Festival of Voice. So for 2 years I was involved in Festival of Voice, and I think things like that, which are it's really sort of an incredibly important part of Wales, which is the idea of the voice, of singing. And I think that what we need to do, if I was to think of something in terms of the 4 hours, like I was talking about earlier, and in terms of restoration, singing, and I know I'm a singer as well, so I'm biased, but it represents so much. It's so ancient. It's all about, your voice and finding your voice, and that can mean more than just singing. It's about identity. It's about healing. It's about democracy. It's about empowerment and creativity. And so I think this idea of really looking back at and redeveloping this idea of Wales as the land of song is incredibly powerful. And so for me, I would, as a creative and an artist, over the next few years, and I imagine we'll work together in the future to see what's possible, but trying to think of Wales as the land of song and everything that can mean, because little things like when you're singing in a choir together, your heartbeats start to sync, and I think that there is nothing, if you're talking about connection, and the interconnected nature of all things, I think to sing together is to be together, is to really understand on a deeper level and put aside differences in race or sexuality, gender, whatever. There's something so powerfully unifying in singing. So
Absolutely. I think it's one of the Scandinavian countries. I think it's Finland. The health service employs choir directors, full-time choir directors, because probably for that reason, because it lowers heart disease.
Yeah.
And it's like, I mean, we should be doing that in Wales. People talk about social prescribing.
Yeah.
And absolutely. I mean, let's use some of the our health service funding to do preventative work in all kinds of literally creative ways.
Yeah, absolutely. But also, I think that to couple that as well with the forests of Wales, and also that Wales still has some really amazing wild natural places, and obviously that's the thing on the whole earth that's in most peril as well at the moment, is this idea of all of these wild natural places being taken over for human gain. So I think that I mean, at the moment, with the school that I've set up, the Ymuna project, we're in the forest for this next year because of COVID-19. We thought, we can't, it's not really safe to be inside, and we don't know what's going to happen. So let's have a school in the forest. So we've got a parliament of children in the woods who are making their own education. But also it
sounds like the Tylwyth Teg. You're saying, going back to the Celtic civilization. It sounds wonderful. Yeah,
absolutely. But I think that it's in order for us to do this in terms of independence as well. It's about reforging our connection with the land as well, and so more singing in the woods is what I say.
And well, there we are. That's exclusive Pai Cymru manifesto pledge revealed. But yeah, well, no, actually, the evidence, is really, really strong on this. So both on being close to trees, this is hard science, right? People think, oh God, this is just kind of airy fairy. It's absolutely evidence based. Tree bathing, they call it in some cultures, but being near to trees is really, really good for you. Yeah. And then access to sunlight. It's one of the most important things, to be in the open air in terms of your physical and your mental health. Being outside, because particularly CO2 levels within school buildings, we need to ventilate. We need to do that in the COVID time more than ever. But actually getting kids outdoors, really, really important. Your IQ is higher, kind of if you spend time outdoors. So these things need to be there, don't they, as core parts of how we organize ourselves.
But isn't it wonderful that those two things are free?
Yeah.
So this isn't like some huge social program that needs to cost tens of millions of pounds. I mean, yeah, both of those things are free.
And yeah, absolutely. And we if we were talking about the wealth of Wales, and going back to the economics of independence, we don't measure this stuff at the moment. So we're not measuring what economists are calling it now natural capital. Wales has got really great natural capital. We've got good social capital as well, because I remember when I first moved to London because of the job, and you say hello to, you come from a village, you say hello to everyone, don't you? And the reaction, of course, in a big city is like, oh my God, what's the matter with you? In Wales, we've still got that connection. So we've got the environmental natural capital, we've got the social capital, but that doesn't appear at the moment in that sort of conventional, economics ledger. But it's good news, right?
Absolutely.
We've got an abundance of riches. If I just show that again.
Well done. You're doing well.
Yeah. I think I should name my plant now. I don't know.
I think on that note, we have to finish. But
Annie for annibyniaeth.
Annie
for annibyniaeth. There we are. Okay. Right. I think, it's been fantastic. I don't know whether people at home have enjoyed as much as we have, but we've had a ball, haven't we?
It's been lovely having a chat. I love a chat. We're Welsh, shouldn't we? We love a chat.
Exactly, and we've all got the indie bus to look forward to. So come into a street corner near to you, and then we'll retire to the pub and have a bit of a debate.
Yes, absolutely. How civilized.
And get everyone involved. Charlotte, it's been fantastic, and thanks for holding the fort when I had to do a little bit of a.
No worries. I understand. With your
yeah, there we are. And looking forward to seeing you soon, and we can start catching up close again at some point, I hope.
Yes, fingers crossed.
All right, great, lovely. Diolch yn fawr, Charlotte. Thanks to everyone. And if those of you that are into your art, there's an art auction now. That was my pathetic attempt at a Cardiff accent. It's no good, is it? See that reacting again.
There's an art happening. If you like that.
But if you like a bit of art, I got to help myself. Then there's an art auction started. A fantastic, amazing collection of some of Wales's stellar artists. There's so many Biennale people there. I've lost count. So if you like your art, get on to the Plaid Cymru website now and join the Zoom call and get yourself some art. No star.
Bye.